Arpin, where are we?
We are at the Salon Jacques Beauchamp, which is the media lounge here at the Bell Center. This is pretty late Thursday evening after the Canadiens' 5-1 loss to the Florida Panthers. We were both at the game. Logistics made it so we couldn't record on Friday, so we're here together.
Yeah.
It's the first time in a long time we've actually been together recording. We used to do this back when we started the podcast, the old podcast. We used to do this regularly at your kitchen table.
That's right.
Quite often, yeah.
But it wasn't film though back then. It was strictly audio.
So here we are in the same. So we are here. That's why you might hear some background noises. This is where we eat prior to games, where all the scouts gather and stuff. A lot of stuff happens here. So this game has just ended. But I think more so than the loss, we're going to talk about a couple of bigger picture issues that came up. Not only in this game against Florida, but in the prior night against Columbus.
Let's start with Alex Newhook, because I think that it's the fact that he was injured tonight might have a ripple effect on the way that Martin Saint-Louis organizes his roster, but also the fact that lately he's probably been the Canadiens' best forward, or at least the most productive. He was really coming into his own. There was really something going on between him, Suzuki, and Gallagher.
Yeah.
That line had created some chemistry already. And Newhook, it's interesting because let's remember that last year, Kirby Dach took a little while before really getting going on his new team. It might have taken longer for Newhook, but lately he was really showing how a lot more comfortable he was with the Montreal Canadiens, especially playing now with Suzuki. Unfortunately, that seems to have come to a halt where he hit hit the net.
Similar to Dach.
Yeah, exactly.
Similar to Dach last year, yeah.
Absolutely. So for those who have not seen the game, Newhook early in the third period hit the side of the net and seemed to twist his left leg. I don't know if it's the ankle, the knee, or whatever, but it didn't look good. He was not even able to skate on his own. He asked for his teammates to pick him up and help him escort him off the ice. So he's going to be reevaluated on Friday, but it doesn't really look good.
No, it didn't look good. I mean, whenever a guy needs help to get off the ice, obviously not a good situation. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think I mentioned to you at some point in the game, Marty's really found something with this combination of Newhook, Suzuki, and Gallagher. Was easily the Canadiens' best line on the road trip. And additionally, Martin threw a wrinkle finally on the first power play unit, taking Josh Anderson off there and putting Newhook on that first unit, which opens up a whole host of possibilities that we'll get into a little bit later. But it's obviously dependent on Newhook being available. But the one thing is that he was finding his groove in a big way. And it was interesting to me that, I think we mentioned it in a prior episode, but having Gallagher there to do some of the things that Newhook used to be asked to do in Colorado and was being asked to do on other line combinations where, being the F1, going to the net front, being a puck retriever, having Gallagher opposite him really seemed to free him up to be more of a creator and more of an imaginative offensive player. Unfortunate timing, because that line had strung together, and again, against the Panthers was probably their best line going into the third period. So bad timing, but overall encouraging signs for Alex Newhook, even though despite the injury, was really showing what made him a first-round pick in that draft. That's the Canadiens' favorite draft to go get players from, the Caulfield draft and the Dach draft, obviously.
Let's go. Let's watch them go after Pete and Krebs in not too long.
Yeah, exactly. It should be imminent. But yeah. So I don't want to speculate too much about that injury. I mean, it could turn out to be minor. It didn't look minor. Definitely a leg shouldn't fold the way it did when Newhook hit the side of the net. But encouraging signs. And let's. You want to get into the power play? A little bit?
Let's do this right now because it was such a blatant and obvious change from what we've seen so far. We've discussed at length how the Canadiens have been having trouble finding the right guy to play in the bumper. But what we saw against the Panthers was a setup where there was no bumper. There was a guy that could slide in and be in the center slot once in a while. It was destined to be, it was supposed to be Newhook mainly. But the fact of the matter is that you had Newhook more often than not that was on the first unit. Welcome change for him. That was set up on the right circle, and Suzuki was on the goal line. You had almost two guys on the goal line, basically.
You did have two guys on the goal line. You had Suzuki in the corner on the goal line, Monahan by the net on the goal line, and Caulfield in his normal spot in his circle with Matheson up top and Newhook on the other side. So I think
Newhook being actually the fact not having a right shot in the bumper would change the whole dynamic, but it opened up different passing lanes, and I thought that's what was really interesting. The Canadians were supposed to use that scheme against Columbus, but they didn't have a single power play, so they didn't try that. But I felt as though Nick Suzuki was rather enthusiastic about that setup.
Well, listen, Josh Anderson throughout his career, obviously he hasn't scored a goal period this year, but throughout his career has not been a very productive player on the power play. Has gotten multiple opportunities. This is probably the longest stretch he's had on power play one in a Canadiens uniform. It's been because it's been pretty evident. But the one thing he was doing was, facilitating possession. Like he'd basically become a puck retriever, which basically eliminated him as a scoring threat. The Canadiens weren't using him at all. He wasn't getting many shots from the bumper spot. Wasn't making himself available to be a shooter. Really, poor understanding of passing lanes, and really that bumper player can't be static. You need to be moving constantly in order to be an option. He wasn't doing that. So it had been a while that people were, I think fans were clamoring for it. Even the media had been asking about it. And really what this took was just a philosophical shift from Martin St. Louis that you don't need a right shot in that bumper. You don't have to have Nick Suzuki in the right circle. Not everything has to originate with Suzuki, having Suzuki be more of a rover option or a shooting option, because when he's on that other side, even if he's in the corner and on the goal line, he could be a shooter there. And plus that made Newhook a one-timer option if Suzuki had the puck in the corner.
Because you want to create more shooting options, and it was always the same thing. It was, you had Suzuki if he didn't pass to Caulfield, would have those 2 steps forward and then try a wrister. Obviously, from the point, Matheson could be an option too, but you want to have one more guy who can be a shooting option. And that's interesting because that way, with that setup, it seemed to open up things a little bit.
Yeah, and it just makes them less predictable, right? And so the Canadiens' power play was relatively easy to scout. You knew what they were trying to do. That primary option was indeed Suzuki skating out into the neutral zone, getting a bit of momentum, getting the puck, and then making a decision based on what's available to him. And what teams were leaving available to him was that pass to Monahan on the goal line in the hopes that he could hit Anderson in the bumper, which never happened, or he can cross it himself to Caulfield or give it back to Suzuki. That seemed to be the entire setup of the power play, seemed to be to get that situation happening. Now, with lefty added instead of Anderson, it basically, while it seemed against Florida, and this is what Suzuki explained, and even Monahan explained that it kind of worked out that way tonight, where Thursday night, where it looked like they didn't have a bumper, but that was largely predicated on how the Panthers kill penalties, and they've been excellent on the penalty kill, as Martin St. Louis mentioned. But normally, I think you would see Newhook playing more of a traditional bumper role, but they've shifted the point of attack to the left side of the ice. Mm-hmm. And so, and I'm sure that has added wrinkles where Suzuki could swing around the net and go to his normal spot on the right side, and a whole host of other options make themselves available. But it was interesting to hear, Suzuki, they haven't practiced this on the ice. Like I've been at every practice and we haven't seen this. Suzuki mentioned that they've been talking about it for a few days. So, and when you think about it, they played Saturday in LA, practiced Monday in LA, did not show this. Practiced Tuesday in Columbus, did not show this. And then played Wednesday. So that clearly suggests that at the very least Monday and Tuesday, they they discussed this, even though they didn't show it. And, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Canadiens are now 0 for their last 21 on the power play.
Yeah, well, they were 0 for 17 before the game against the Panthers. They had one power play that lasted 2 seconds thanks to a Cole Caulfield
So
penalty.
they finished 0 for 6.
But
So
technically,
they're 0 for 23.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something had to change, right? And so it's and there's a welcome change. I mean, honestly, like it's been a while, and actually the other result of it is that Jesse Ullinen got on the second unit to replace Newhook, which is something that Martin St. Louis was first asked about, I would say 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, and kept saying, and even I asked him prior to the game against Columbus, you see Ullinen, the hands, he scored a gorgeous goal in practice in Los Angeles, where he just completely deked, like right out of his pants. I can't remember who the goalie was, but it was similar to a shootout goal.
Right.
But it was done within the flow of play and practice, and you see the hands he had, even against the Panthers. There was one situation where he had like a really tight window to get a shot off, and the puck was kind of in his feet, and he got it up to a shooting and got a puck off his stick really quickly. Like those offensive instincts he has are real.
Yeah.
And so getting him on the second unit will probably be a help to that second. Well, Newhook, I don't know if that trade really benefits the second unit, but at least it gives you.
I don't know who's going to carry the puck in for that unit, though.
Well, that's it. I think it's
either going to be Barron or maybe Pearson
or Ullinen.
Or Ullinen. Yeah, it could be Ullinen.
Yeah. So in any case, it's. I think another example, we've talked about this before, but like it takes a lot for Marty to kind of change his mind on something. He likes to give his ideas lots of runway. Let's give this a chance to succeed. Gave the Josh Anderson on power play one thing, lots of runway. Finally relented. So, he can be convinced. Who knows in the background who was trying to campaign for this, but finally came to fruition in this game.
So I'm interested to see if Newhook ends up missing, a lot of time or any significant time, if their new ideas that they wanted to bring on that PP1 will remain the same even without him, because it's often a question of personnel. So
it could be Ullinen who winds up in that spot.
Could be. I mean, they finished the night obviously with Josh Anderson playing on PP1, so that all that stuff was pretty short lived.
But if Newhook was going to be the bumper, then Pearson might actually be a good fit. If they don't care that they have a lefty there, and Newhook was basically supposed to be the bumper on that.
How about Slav?
Or Slav? Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you gotta. The kid has been. I mean, he was not great against the Panthers.
No,
but. I mean, he's been significantly better for the past couple of weeks.
Yeah,
I think, and at some point, if you run a meritocracy, if you have this idea that power play is something that you earn, Slav could have very well earned some time.
I think the problem with Slav on the power play has been, he's in that right circle one-timer spot on the second unit, and invariably, when he gets the puck in that spot, his feet, his whole body is not set up to shoot. It's set up to pass, and we saw it in that Panthers game. He suddenly has a 2-on-1 with Caulfield, and you could tell in his mind, his thought process the whole way was, I'm going to get this puck to Caulfield. So if you don't present just with your body language that you're going to be a threat to shoot, which he didn't, everyone on the Panthers, everyone in the building knew that Slavkovsky was trying to get it to Caulfield because his body was basically pointed towards Caulfield. So you have to at least give the impression that you may shoot it. And this is, the continued evolution of Slavkovsky. But this has been his problem on the power play, is that he does not have enough of a shooting mentality and wants to be a playmaker. And I think that was indicative, or we saw that at least, kind of manifest itself in that 2-on-1 with Caulfield, where they were taking Caulfield away, because no matter who's coming on that 2-on-1, if you have Cole Caulfield on the other side, then your priority is going to be to get it to him. But when the other team decides that we're going to take it, even Bobrovsky was, I think, cheating towards that pass for most of that 2-on-1. He just needs to be able to recognize those things. And obviously, this is part of the process with him, but his process has been significantly better consistently, and really kind of turned on that road trip where he just started making more plays and just being more confident with the puck and being even more confident without it, protecting it, making plays on the wall. The goal, which he got an assist on, but the Caulfield goal in Columbus that tied the game, that was a situation where, again, Christian Dvorak was on a 2-on-1 with Cole Caulfield, saw that they were taking Caulfield away, so he decided to shoot it. He shot it right into the chest protector of Elvis Merzlikins, but still created a rebound, created a scramble. Caulfield wound up scoring, but the play that made that play happen was Juraj Slavkovsky in his own end on the wall, protecting it from a potential forechecker and getting it up the wall to Dvorak to create that 2-on-1 situation. And that's the kind of things. Those plays are the plays that Juraj Slavkovsky is focusing on as being something that has to be in his tool bag. It has to be in his toolkit, where if a puck is on the wall and I'm there, I'm going to not only win that battle, but I'm going to get that puck to where I want it to go. And he was probably prouder of that assist than he would have been if he set up a one-timer or something. It's because the board play has been really his primary focus for the last few weeks.
That goal against Columbus, that line really needed it because their first half of the game was absolutely terrible.
It was atrocious.
Atrocious. Yeah. I mean, I've rarely seen Cole Caulfield have such poor puck management.
Yeah.
He committed something like 4 or 5 turnovers.
Two
only
blatant ones in his own end, coming like right off the wall, right into the middle of the ice, just horribly misguided passes.
And another one in the in the neutral zone that led to a counterattack. But no, it was, 4 or 5 turnovers just in the first half of the game. But they seemed to, that goal seemed to create some momentum on that line. But especially,
it completely changed the game. From that goal on, the Canadians started to dominate.
About that line. They had another extremely dominant shift where they spent their whole shift in the offensive zone and everybody changed actually.
They were the second line on.
Right.
That started with the Suzuki line, and then the Suzuki line got off. They came on, spent the rest of their shift in the offensive zone, and actually managed to get a full change in. And then as soon as Josh Anderson touched the puck, he lost it, and the shift was over. Yeah,
but my point is to say that it changes the momentum for the team. But that line itself had 2 or 3 very good shifts. But I cannot say in the big picture, despite the fact that they were productive, there was a good game from that line.
I don't know. I think the second half of that game they were good. That's how I saw it. They definitely improved. They had a tough first half, no doubt, and I think they weren't the only ones in that game in Columbus. But and that line, it's going to happen with that line. Cole Caulfield is kind of the primary puck carrier on that line. He's supposed to be the guy that has the puck on his stick, and that's not really his game. He's always been a guy who doesn't want the puck on his stick, who wants to go and find space and hide. And when he's played, Dvorak does not like having the puck on his stick. It's not his strength. Slav does like having the puck on his stick, but that's a work in progress, and he's still trying to get to the point where he has the so that makes Caulfield the primary puck carrier, and hasn't been his game to date.
No, that's something. His last year in Wisconsin, that was one of his primary focuses to make sure that he'd be the guy who would carry the puck instead of just being the finisher. That he would orchestrate the play, be the main transition guy. So it's something that he added at the college level, but it's one thing to add it in Wisconsin. It's a whole different thing to add it with the Canadiens jersey on.
And it's worth noting, even though it was kind of a garbage assist because the goal was kind of garbage, but Kovacevic, who is challenging Newhook as the hottest goal scorer
on the streak,
on the team.
Man.
Yeah,
4 goals in 7 games.
He's streaking through the quad. But Caulfield picked up an assist on that goal.
Yeah.
I think that was his 12th assist of the year, if I'm not mistaken. He had 10 all of last season. So I think
he's a good passer, man.
Yeah. Well, I think he wants
passer.
to add that element to his game. There's a lot of things that he's trying to change about his game, which is why he gets, I think, a little annoyed about the questions about the goal scoring, even though he is scoring goals. It's just not quite at the same rate as he did last season. But he's trying to become a better player away from the puck. He's trying to become more of a playmaker. He's trying to round out his game. and working really hard at that. And that's why I think he gets a little frustrated when he gets asked about the goal scoring, because I think he feels pretty good about some of the strides he's making away from the puck. So let's just get back to Josh Anderson for 1 second, because
we mentioned his name is passing, but he has not been a topic yet. But let's tackle the thing. He's back. Martin St. Louis says that he's back.
Okay, well, that's a little premature. It was a bit premature because it's difficult for Josh Anderson to play the way he did Thursday night every night. That was playoff Josh Anderson. That's the guy you see in the playoffs where he does do that every night. And the last time we saw him in the playoffs, which was the 2021 run to the final, obviously, you think back to the poor Maple Leafs defense. I mean, Jake Muzzin, Josh Anderson basically ended Jake Muzzin's career when you think back to it. But he was such a menace in that series that Maple Leafs defensemen, when they had to go back for pucks, they just got rid of it as soon as they could. Like, they did not want, and you kind of saw that against Florida after the way he started the game. There was one point he chipped it behind Gustav Forsling and went after it. And normally Forsling would turn immediately and try and get to that puck. And he didn't do that. He waited and he let Anderson get that puck and then just basically contained him. And that's the impact that Josh Anderson can have on a way a team plays when he plays that way. And it just seemed from the get-go. It's unfortunate Josh didn't come out to talk. He was requested to talk after the game against Florida. He had obviously left the game after getting into that fight with Gadjevich at the end, which he didn't really initiate, but didn't shy away from either at all, and I think handled himself.
It was blood in his hand. If it was, it might have been, I think it was
Gadjevich.
Yeah, I think it was.
His helmet was off, but
I think it was his own blood. It was not Gadjevich's blood.
No, it was,
it might have had something to do with this with his hand. But the Josh Anderson that played against the Panthers, scoring, no scoring, doesn't matter at all. You want that guy on your team.
Yeah.
So it's and I mean, for the most part, I mean, there's been a few games where you thought, oh, he's getting further away, from the day that he's going to score his next goal, because the chances are less and less. But he's been swinging the pendulum in the right direction again. I thought that against Columbus, it was very energetic too. Obviously, he had something to prove against his former team, but against Florida, he was the best player on the ice. Well, at least for the Canadians, there's no. Yeah. I mean, you can debate because obviously there was no Canadian stars on that game against in that game against the Panthers, and Barkov and Bennett were everywhere. But I mean, for the Canadians, you want that guy. He might not be the one. Obviously, one day he'll have to score, but to go back to him and say, oh, you know what? It's been 0 for 22. You got to do something. But
you got to do something. I mean, that's what Josh did. I mean, right from his first shift in this game, just decided that anyone wearing a white jersey, I'm going to try to destroy. I'm just going to try, and that's an element that Josh Anderson has to his game that not many players do, and that's what makes him an attractive player. I was talking to a scout about him during the game, and listen, like, until he produces the way he has basically his entire career, that cap number is not going to be appealing to anyone. But the fact is, and this scout didn't really agree, but I have spoken to other scouts about Josh Anderson, like that element of Josh Anderson where he's playing the way he did against Florida with that reckless abandon and that chaotic violence that he brings to his game is a much sought after commodity. And teams with playoff aspirations will remember the way he played in that playoff run for the Canadians. And it was exactly what it looked like against Florida. He didn't score a goal, but drew a penalty, could have been a penalty shot. I think a very good argument could be made that it should have been a penalty shot. I wonder with Josh's psyche right now how he would have handled that situation. It would have been a very big mental challenge to have a penalty shot granted to him. Would have been great drama, and unfortunately we didn't get to see that, but still drew 2 penalties by being aggressive and by being fast. Like, Nick Suzuki was just marveling at how he split the defense on that play. He's like, who does that? Like, there's so few guys in the league who can do that. We hadn't seen that in a long time. I agree that the game in Columbus was a slight improvement, but when he got put on that line with Monahan and Pearson, and it just seemed like his arrival dragged that line down. Like Monahan, we hadn't seen him play worse than we'd seen him with Anderson. I mean, let's be honest, even Monahan himself admitted it, and he had a nice bounce back game in Columbus. But Josh Anderson, if he decides that that's the way he's going to play until he scores a goal, or for the rest of the season, or he's just going to go like playoff Josh Anderson every night, that's a useful player. As you said, it's a useful player whether he scores or not, because he just instills fear in the opposing defense, and dumping the puck becomes a very effective weapon with Josh Anderson in that sort of state of mind and in that mindset.
You mentioned the fact that he drew 2 penalties. He leads the Canadians for drawn penalties. He's 16. Up to 16. I think the second best on the Canadians is Mike Matheson at 9.
He's tied for second in the NHL. When I checked, he was tied for second in the NHL
behind Matthew Tkachuk.
Matthew Tkachuk, and I would venture to guess that a lot of those Matthew Tkachuk was at 18. I would venture to guess a lot of those are offsetting minors, which count in the NHL's count of drawn penalties. They don't all necessarily have to result in a power play.
Right.
So I think I would venture to guess that Josh Anderson has probably led to the most power plays or close to it in the NHL at this point, because he's only taken 8 penalties himself, but those 16, I would say the vast majority of those 16 drawn penalties have given the Canadians a power play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, I want to circle back quickly to Newhook, because you mentioned Monahan makes me think of the fact that earlier in the season, the Canadians had an embarrassment of riches at the center position, but now without Doc, and maybe, well,
they had many centers, I would say.
That's what I mean.
Right.
I'm not saying
the
that
embarrassment of riches makes it sound like they had like these world-class centers and that they didn't.
Okay, fine. It's lost in translation. All right. Okay. They had 6 centermen for 4 spots.
Right.
Are you happy?
I'm just
okay. Yeah. So now Doc is hurt, and Newhook is hurt too. So it's going to be tricky. We saw Monahan being put. Martin St. Louis finished the game. Obviously, they were trailing, and they tried to come back. So they put Suzuki with Caulfield and Monahan. You can do that even less than before, but there's this shortage of centermen right now. What's the solution, you think?
I don't know.
Do I have to mention the name Mitchell Stephens again?
Here we go with the Mitchell Stephens talk.
Yeah. No,
I don't know. I don't know what the. I mean, listen, it's. Well, they don't have a shortage of centermen yet.
No, because they still have. They have 4. They have 4 because they've got Monahan, they've got Dvorak, and they've got Evans. So
they haven't lost. They didn't lose a centerman. They lost a winger. So I mean, they don't have. They're not swimming in the same level of center depth, but let's see what the situation with Newhook. It didn't look good necessarily, but again, it's the similarities to Doc from last season are so striking, and it's really too bad. I mean, listen, forget what happened to Doc this season, but even last season around this time, I wish I had it in front of me, but it seems like it was kind of the timing was somewhat similar for Doc to go down, but the timing was definitely similar in the sense that Doc had figured something out, and you were starting to see it over a series of games, and he was gone. Not sure what's going to happen with Newhook, but that risks being the same kind of thing. So I wanted to talk to you about, and this is, so after the game against Florida, Marty was adamant that he thought they played a good game, and frankly, I don't disagree with him. I think there's a lot of circumstances that have to be taken into account. The Canadians were coming off a back-to-back with travel, long road trip. First game back after a long road trip is historically difficult. They're playing against a really tough opponent that had Aaron Ekblad back, had Brandon Montour back. Like this is the Florida Panthers, team basically.
Yeah.
Like they weren't really missing too much, and that team. Similar to the Kings, but do it in a different way in the sense that getting from your end to the offensive zone requires a lot of effort. It requires it requires execution. It requires being disciplined and smart. And exploiting the holes where they are. And it just seemed like every time the Canadiens had the puck, there were 3 Panthers around them, no matter where the puck was.
Yeah, Kovacevic said after the game, this is exactly the sort of play that they do that explains why they went so far in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, and then, when Martin talks about, I want our team to be on top of them, I think we got a good example of what he means by that, by how the Panthers play. So I think it's – and this is like – there's been numerous occasions over the last few days where the tone of Martin's expectations have changed, and he's just taking the reality of how young this team is. Yeah. And even Nick Suzuki, after the game, said how he saw somewhere that that the Canadiens right now are icing the youngest lineup in the league. I don't know where he saw that. I mean, I know at the beginning of the season, the Canadiens officially had the 3rd youngest team in the league, but he kind of pushed back when it was brought up that they were 3rd. He's like, no, but I think right now, with the way things are set with Savard out, that's it. That right now we're icing the youngest lineup in the league, which is entirely possible. So it's an interesting shift in expectations. It wasn't so long ago that Martin said, I don't care how young we are. We have a way we want to play. We have concepts we want to execute. Young or not young, I want us to go and do that. And I think him saying that I thought we played a good game. Yeah, I think they did play a good game. Right up until Caden Primo gave up 3 goals he really wished he hadn't given up. And I believe he called his performance some version of unacceptable. After the game.
At the end he said unacceptable. Yeah, because he said that there was it got into his head that the fact that he gave 2 identical goals on the glove side, he started thinking about it, second guessing himself. And that led to
the Panthers continued shooting every puck to the glove side. Yeah, and he must have known. He must have like that. Even if you make the save, you're like, man, they're targeting my glove. My glove's not good. And so but point being that I feel he did something similar in the Kings game where he was like, listen, it's all things considered, we play. He doesn't say all things considered. But when he says we played a good game tonight, I think in the background is all things considered. And that's a bit of a shift for Marty compared to where his mindset was after their first 10 or 12 games where the record was really good. And then, he's getting swept up in the possibility that we could fight for the playoffs and all this other nonsense. Yeah. I think reality is fully set in with Marty and his expectations for this club. Which is a good thing because I think now, I think that needs to be the prism through which Marty makes decisions. And I don't know if he was doing that as much earlier in the season.
I think that he sort of got out of his way for a little bit towards maybe, I would say, towards the end of October when he had, we discussed that in the previous episode when he caught himself making decision based on the result and not the process. So it became a theme. I mean, the fact that he came out after the Panthers game and say, well, we played a good game, considering they came back from a long trip, 2 games in 2 nights and whatnot, the level of effort was there. You've got to send the positive message to and
say they had no passengers.
Exactly. Yeah. And tell your team, I recognize what you did. It was not the outcome that they wanted, but they played Stanley Cup finalists. They played a better team, but they didn't play a bad game. Yeah. So I understand, and I fully agree on the fact that it's reality checking in, settling in, because at this point, the team has to readjust. You have to understand what you're asking your players, what they're capable of giving you. Mm-hmm. And you have to get your wins where you're going to be able to get them. Yeah. So sometimes it's not going to be in the score, but if you want to focus on improvement, on development, you have to not only have big picture goals, but look, okay, well, let's say with that certain young player, did he give me more tonight? What I asked him yesterday, did he put in an application? Did he apply it tonight? And so it's taking those teachings that he'll give on Monday and say, how do they translate it on Tuesday? And that way they have a much better chance at keeping their mind in a positive frame, because if they want to develop, they cannot be angry all the time that they'll be losing games. Otherwise, it's going to be counterproductive. So how do you manage to keep things positive despite the fact that the results are not going in your favor? It's because you have, as a coach, to recognize and let your players know that you recognize where they're improving, where they get better.
Yeah. And so this is sort of a stark contrast from the game in Boston, right, which you covered and I did not. But that game, I mean, there's some serious PTSD with the Canadians from that game. It's like, honestly, like Martin spent just so on Tuesday practice in Columbus. The practice on Monday in Los Angeles was after a day off, which came after the Canadians' rookie dinner in Saturday night in LA. And so that practice was hard skating, 45 minutes, super intense, a lot of skating, a lot of work, get a sweat on, as Marty described it on Tuesday in Columbus, was a tactical kind of practice, which is very similar to what they did prior to leaving on this trip. They had a work practice at home, went to Anaheim, and had a heavily tactical practice. And so they had they had a situation where they had 2 consecutive days of practice twice, once at the beginning of the trip, once at the end of the trip. 2 practices at the beginning of the trip focused entirely 100% on the forecheck. The end of the trip, entirely 100% on rush defense, something that's been a theme throughout the season, as something that comes and goes in waves. I think, and he even during that practice made reference to situations that happened in the Boston game, like more than a week prior. At one point mentioned there was one goal that Boston scored where Brendan Gallagher blew a tire in the offensive zone trying to forecheck. Boston came up, got tons of room to walk into the offensive zone. The blue line was a total demilitarized zone for the Canadians. Boston walked in, set up a shot, and scored. And so he brought that up and was like, "Listen, I think they were doing a drill where it was a 4-on-3. He's like, listen, this principle applies at 5-on-4. Go back to that Boston game when we lost Galley, and you guys, at that point you got to think, okay, we're 5-on-4. We're killing a penalty basically. So those principles come into play temporarily until Gallagher can get back into the play. So the point being is that he spent 2 days working on the forecheck, presumably in video as well, and saw improvement slowly. It didn't take hold right away. Anaheim was meh. San Jose was meh. But that game against LA, actually, even though they were getting kind of dominated in the sense that they couldn't make any headway into the offensive zone, in terms of forechecking and stuff like that, like they actually played pretty well. And defensively gave up not that many great chances in that game. So it looked depressing to watch and probably depressing to play because they couldn't get anything accomplished, but they did play probably their most defensively sound game in California. But then you saw those principles come into play in Columbus. And that's really, I think, the background for we played a good game against Florida, which because A, they did, but they applied those principles that they spent so much time working on that trip and put them into practice. I mean, listen, a lot of the goals that Florida scored, at least in the third period, came from the outside. And those are shots that the Canadians are willing to give up. And it's not a reflection of poor rush defense to give up those shots. So,
the goal was very early in the third. I mean, Barron got caught against the boards, and it allowed Bennett to skate through and he was in the slot. He was in a prime position and had all the time and all the space and to beat Primo where he wanted. But I guess I get your point. For the most part, they kept them on the outside. They gave up a few odd man rushes though. That's still
a few. But again, it's all. Again, Martin can't say that, but it's always all things considered. I think considering how young our team is, and I think it expands beyond the schedule circumstances. I think right now it's considering our team, considering we're trying to build something, considering that I have to spend 2 days on rush defense after spending 2 days on it a few weeks earlier. I asked, when was that? Yeah, I guess I asked after the practice in Columbus, is it kind of disappointing that you have to go back to this when you just spent practices not that long ago on this very thing? He said, well, that's kind of the reality of a young team. Like it's gonna come and go, and when it goes, then you have to address it and you have to stop it, and that's what we're doing. So,
and another thing that's been in his discourse a lot, and I've heard some players like Sean Monahan say it too, is that you fix something and something else starts.
Yeah, it's whack-a-mole.
Starts leaking. So they're already always patching holes here and there. It can be a little bit exhausting because and it's difficult to get your rhythm where you feel as though whenever you try to apply pressure or fix something in a certain point, something else starts going wrong. So it's very hard to get momentum, but that's a byproduct of a young team and B a not very good team.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I don't think the Panthers are springing leaks every time they patch one up, or the Kings for that matter. And so this is reality. Listen, this episode, it is Thursday night when we're recording this, but it's coming out on Friday. It's Future Friday.
Yeah. Yes.
Future Friday. New branding. We should get some T-shirts made and bumper stickers, hats. But so for Future Friday, Marc-Antoine put a story out on Jacob Fowler earlier this week. I recommend you all to read it on Radio Canada's website. You can throw it through Google Translate if you can't read in French, but I recommend you do. So why don't you give us some of the editing floor bits that didn't get in there? Are there any things that you learned over the course of that trip, maybe a conversation that you might have had with anyone that didn't quite make it into your story, but you think, man, I wish I could have gotten that in there?
No, everything that I wanted to have in there, I put in there.
I used everything.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. Judging by the length of it, I didn't hold back. Yeah. But I mean, this kid's interesting, and we hear a lot that there's more goalies now that adopt the grand Fuhrer mentality. It's all about making the last save. Yeah. You understand that you're not in the league where the goalies have the upper hand anymore. It's not all about flashing amazing statistics, but at the right moment, are you going to be able to make the right save? Mm-hmm. And that's what Jacob Fowler is all about. Right now, he's among the leaders at the NCAA level for save percentage, and he says it's a business. It's a stat-based business. But he says, I really tried to put that aside. And he's wise to do that because there are some goalies that have stacked some amazing statistics at college level. I mean, only last year there was this Quebec goalie, Yaniv Peretz, who had amazing statistics. I think he was at Quinnipiac. It earned him a contract. That's great, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee the fact that all of a sudden he's become this high-end goalie prospect. So you take some, you leave some when it comes to statistics. But Fowler, he says, as much as I would like to have my statistics like right up there, to me, it's all about making sure that I make the last save. Mm. And what really came out, both talking to his head coach, to his goalie coach, to his captain, it's the fact that he's a guy that exudes a lot of confidence. Mm. And it's pretty special for a guy who's still a freshman. So he just arrived in there, and
he's playing every single game.
Yeah, he's played all the time. Yeah. I mean, last time I checked, he had played every minute. He might have given the net in his last game. I haven't checked the last couple of days, but yeah, he's been used all the time. The schedule is a bit weird, and it enabled Boston College to give him maybe a bit more playing time, and eventually they would like to integrate one of their two other goalies in the mix. But he's been solid for them, and it's funny because the game I saw, that was the night before the Canadiens game in Boston, and that was Fowler's worst game of the season so far.
Right. Yeah, but tell us about that game, because I think that was a telling game of who this guy is.
Yeah. So Boston College starts off amazingly well on the offense. They spend the whole period in Connecticut's end. Connecticut has 5 shots on Fowler. He would like to see more rubber, and he doesn't get tested a whole lot, but he gives up a goal that not a great goal. Second period, Connecticut starts kicking Boston College's butt, left, right, and center. The Boston College defense collapses, and Fowler is not in his game enough to stop his teammates' mistakes. So he ended up giving 4 goals in like 15 or 16 shots. So at that point, after 2 periods, I thought, that might be a game where the head coach will choose to give some ice time to one of his 2 other goalies. But no, he came back with Fowler because he said after the game,
Well, the game was close, right?
Yeah, they were losing by 1.
Right.
So Coach Brown said he's still the guy that was going to give me the best chance to win. And sure enough, in the third period, he came back and Fowler really stood on his head. He had by far his best period of the game. BC, their offense, rolls on all cylinders, and they ended up winning in overtime. And the day after, BC started slowly again in their return game against Connecticut, and that time Fowler earned his first shutout. Mm-hmm. So he built on that third period where he said, okay, what I might not have done very well in the first 2 periods, but we're still in it. I'm going to make the last save. And it's really a window into the mindset of that kid, recognizing, when to step up. So it's really, he seems like the sort of guy who can be like a big occasions, big moments goalie. Mm-hmm. And I think that's exactly the point that Billy Ryan made when he was arguing.
In the video,
we saw that video.
This kid effing wins.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's it. So he was arguing with Vincent Riendeau. They were debating between Fowler and some other goalie and who should be higher on their list. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because Riendeau is the
goalie guy.
Is the goalie scout. But Billy Ryan, stood his ground, and eventually, I guess, he won the point. But that's exactly what we've seen so far from Fowler. Mm-hmm. And the only other game that, according to his goalie coach, was really not up to par, it was the first period of the game against Michigan State. And who was playing in net for Michigan State? Trey Augustine. So those 2 guys are probably the 2 favorite guys to be in net for the USA at the World Juniors. It might have played into Fowler's head a little bit, but he came back and he was phenomenal for the other 2 periods. So again, the ability to bounce back. Tonight on Thursday night, we saw from Caden Primo, a guy that in another life had stellar statistics at the college level as a freshman, among other things. But Primo, you see, that's where things didn't go right for him against the Panthers. He gave up 1 bad goal, gave up 2 bad goals. It messed into his head, and next thing you know, the Canadians were out of the game.
Yeah. But the one thing Primo has taught me, actually, the guy who's taught me this is Charlie Lindgren. If you look at Charlie Lindgren's numbers this season, he's legitimately been one of the better goalies in the league.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be honest, it's you look to Charlie Lindgren, his games in the NHL, his games in the AHL. He never struck me as an NHL goaltender. I didn't think he was going to be a starting goaltender in the NHL. It would really surprise me. I had the same impressions about Caden Primo. I mean, the way he was performed, like the inconsistencies in his performance at the AHL level, to me didn't scream excellent NHL goaltending prospect. So it's all that to say, as it relates to Fowler as well, is that this is a long process with goaltenders.
Yeah.
And if the Canadians knew that Charlie Lindgren would turn into the goalie he is today, they probably never would have let him leave. That's why they're so concerned about losing Caden Primo, because they don't know what they have. And eventually that's going to apply to Jacob Fowler to some extent as well. And the whole waiver rule is going to probably come into play with him too, and they're going to have to make decisions, or they're going to have to carry 3 goalies at some point. But it's just that it's not a linear line with goalies, and you need to be more patient. You need to just let things play out more with goalies. And so, as great as Fowler might look now, the transition to professional hockey is going to be difficult. It's very unlikely that it won't be. I mean, you look at, like all the off ice stuff aside, but even Spencer Martin?
No, Spencer Knight.
Spencer Martin's the other goalie. Yes. Yeah. Spencer Knight's path is not, his story is not written yet. It's not finished, but it's not linear. I mean, that's a first round draft pick. And so it's I just find it relevant to Primo now. Like, listen, he had a tough night against Florida. Does that mean he's garbage? No, of course not. He's had a good season. He had one bad game. He's a young goalie. He's trying to develop. It happens. Charlie Lindgren had that at the same age, and it's just the level of patience required with a goaltending prospect, whether they're a first round pick, whether they're a third round pick, whether they're a 7th round pick, or whether they're undrafted like Lindgren was, is a lot higher than what you require with a forward or a defenseman.
So I think, though, that any team in the NHL gives them a great service by drafting guys that are going to college or that are playing in Europe, rather than in the CHL, where they have to make a decision on signing them or not. Much faster. It's you already have to make that decision, and the rules are stacked against you.
Why Primo left college so soon?
So soon, man.
Yeah, it was kind of a great move. But I think in Fowler's case, though, it's he's performing so well as a freshman that temptation is going to be there.
Yeah, but he doesn't talk like that.
That's it.
He sounds like a guy who could be 2 years, 3 years, maybe. I'm not sure if he's going to be there for the full 4 years, but he could be there.
Right at the draft. He wants to overcook in college. I mean, that came out of him on his own. So clearly that priority is there.
Because it's interesting. He said,
"Slimmed down too." You should mention that.
Oh man, yeah. He lost 20 pounds.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if he started Noom. But no, that's no. Actually, there's a nutritionist at Boston College that's helped him a lot, and he feels a lot more agile. Yeah, he was carrying.
He was chubby.
He was carrying unnecessary weight.
Yeah. What was he playing at 230, 225?
He was at two. He said that at the draft he was around 223, and now he's playing between 200 and 205.
And it looked it.
Yeah,
they looked at the draft, and that's why I think a lot of people were worried about his conditioning and his habits.
For sure,
it was clear that in what you learned that he's taken that seriously now, and it's more seriously than he was before.
So he's a guy that one of his main strengths is his lateral pushes. So he moves left and right with a lot of power, with a lot of efficiency, but having that less weight to carry is going to make him even more explosive. He needs to work more on his footwork, maybe. But when it comes to the lateral push, he's really effective there. There's a lot of work also that's being done with his what they call post integration maneuvers. So the reverse VH and other stuff like that. But he's I found him a little bit quick on his knees, but he's not the sort of guy that'll be on his knees and just like hit me, like Carey used to be. But it's more like really working the angles to making sure that you're going to you're going to block it from from any angle. So I think that the Canadians are wise to let him overcook. I love that expression. So if the kid is not in too big of a rush, it's going to be a good thing. Martin St. Louis sent a message to all the kids at development camp last summer. They said there's only that many chairs around the table, so you got to steal one from somebody else. But for a goalie, you cannot rush to steal somebody else's chair. You have to make sure that you're going to be ready the day that the opportunity presents itself. So if he wants to rush things and turn pro too quickly, he might not have that opportunity. So it's better to make sure that he's ready. And so the Canadians have goalie in the NCAA. They have a couple in they have some in Russia.
They have one in particular in Russia in the MHL who is Yevgeny Volokhin.
We spoke about him last week.
We spoke about him last week, and this is really, these two goaltenders. You visited with Fowler. We obviously haven't visited with Volokhin, but these two goalies have. I was talking to Eric Rameau actually before the game in Columbus, and he's watching these goalies, regularly, and he's like, it's two promising kids we have. He's really sees a lot of potential in both of them, and it's an exciting, It was maybe a bit of overkill, the Canadians drafting as many goalies as they did at the last draft, but I don't think so, because it's, again, Charlie Lindgren. Again, the example I give is Charlie Lindgren. You just don't know. You don't know which goalie is going to come out of the sauce.
Charlie's almost 30, though.
I know.
He's a
bit of an anomaly. It's not a normal path, but my point being is that, you can't expect there to be a ton of Charlie Lindgrens and for them to follow that path. But the point being that it's volume drafting goalies is not a dumb thing. Like a guy who might look terrible now might wind up looking great 3 years from now, and the guy who looks great right now, like for example, Jacob Fowler, might not. It's just you just don't. It's really hard to know, and the NHL scouting community has not figured out the projection of goaltenders, and this is it's not a knock on the scouting community. It's so difficult to predict, and it's more of a mental position than any other position in hockey, and it's really hard to know someone that deep into their soul at that age, because they're still not finished developing personality wise or mentally. But the Canadians have at least two, if not more. Really, but at least in the case of Volokhin and Fowler, two really promising looking kids right now.
The fact that the Canadians have so many draft picks also enabled them to say, well, we're going to draft tons of goalies, so that helps when you have only a finite amount. That there are some teams that won't even draft one goalie every year. They'll skip the odd year and say, you know what, we're okay for now. We can't have too many and whatnot. But the Canadians, they slept on that for so long, and they have not been very successful in that regard in trying to find, a replacement for Carey Price.
Right.
The closest thing that they have right now is the guys that they picked up on waiver to replace Carey Price for 10 days. So
yes. Yeah. Who's there?
Speaking of which, let's wrap up with that. Usually we finish with Future Friday, but there were 3 Oilers scouts at the Columbus game, including their assistant general manager and a goalie scout. So either they were there for Merzlikins or they were there for Montembeault. But Montembeault continues to make an attractive case for himself.
I think they were there a bit more for Columbus than for Montreal. I think the fact that it was Montreal was probably a good reason to be there. Merzlikins has a long contract. That if there's one GM in this league who would be scared of a long contract to a goalie, probably be Ken Holland with the one he gave Jack Campbell. But Montembeault is, he's put him. I don't think I would handicap the Canadiens' willingness to trade him at being still really low, just because they're going to want to let the contract extension talks play out. They're going to need to hit a wall in those negotiations for them to be willing to trade this guy. I don't think that they, without knowing how that might go, and because let's be honest, they're not going to get a massive return for any of their goalies. I don't think. It's just not, even though Edmonton's in the situation they are, if the fact that Edmonton has not traded for a goalie yet, to me, shows that they're not willing to just be like, here, I'll give you whatever you want, just give me a goalie as fast as humanly possible. They're riding it out because they're not willing to pay that price. And so if that being the case, and if you're going to get a normal goalie price, which historically we have seen, goaltenders do not bring back a great return in trades. I
You need other teams to need goalies.
Yeah.
Not just Edmonton.
Yeah, exactly.
And express that need for real.
And there's this 7-team no trade list with Jake Allen, which I think is probably going to complicate things. I would not be stunned. I don't know this for a fact, but would it really shock you if Edmonton was on that list?
No.
So it's it's very it's a very fluid situation. I just think that the Canadians, no matter which goalie they trade, are going to want a price that probably Edmonton is unwilling to pay. If it winds up being Edmonton, I think there are other teams in the mix who would like to shore up their goaltending around the league.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But Montembeault, it was funny. Like, he bookended that trip in a way. If you discount the Boston game, he was the starter in Anaheim. He was the starter in Columbus. Kind of showed the progression that the team made between those two games, but he had to be excellent in Anaheim, and quasi stole the game with the amount of chances they gave up to the Ducks. Didn't really have to do that against Columbus, so I thought he was there when he needed to be, he made the saves he needed to make, and in Anaheim he was spectacular. So it really from his point of view. Funny story, actually, after the game in Columbus, I asked for his perspective on the shifts that we mentioned earlier, where they stayed in the offensive zone. And so if you remember, Anderson came out, coughed up the puck came out all the way back to his end, and so Columbus was finally able to get a change in. Montembeault drilled it up to Armia and gave him, pseudo breakaway. And he was like, yeah, I just saw him and I zipped it to him. I was like, yeah, that was a good pass. Like, yeah, I was like, I really wanted an assist there. I'm kind of upset he didn't score. And then when Armia came out, I started with, so by the way, just so you know, Sam's not really impressed with it. Like, he really wanted an assist and you failed to deliver. And he was like, yeah, I know. I really wanted to give him an assist. I really didn't. That
was an elite pass.
It was an elite pass, and Armia shot it into his stomach, and nothing much came of it. He was very disappointed in himself. And then we're like, no, but you wound up getting the game winner, so all's well that ends well. I was like, yeah, but Sam didn't get an assist on the game winner. He's like,
okay.
I was like, you could get Sam dinner at some point. But anyhow, that's just a funny little – Sam wasn't serious.
No.
Let's be clear. Like, he wasn't actually upset.
No.
He just thought – pass of that quality, I should get an assist out of it, and Armia didn't deliver, but he did in the end of the game. So,
but
hard feelings.
Monty still has to convince a significant portion of the fan base that he's for real. I don't know. His progression curve is steady, and he's going.
It is.
He's going upwards all the time. But I think that there's a stigma.
I think term's going to be an issue in this negotiation because of that. Because I think Monty would be fair to feel that he has earned some trust from the organization and that he's worth investing in for multiple years. And I don't know the extent to which the organization is willing to give that trust, because just the nature of the position, as we've been talking about, is so sporadic and can suddenly shift in a player's career. I'm not suggesting that that's going to be the case with Sam Montembeault. I think the team that was here last night on Thursday looks at him and is like, damn, it's just, that was a very quality goaltender that just left our organization on waivers for nothing. But I think term and AAV are going to be a thing, because it's I don't want to call it a crapshoot, because it's not. A lot of research and a lot of thought goes into evaluating goaltenders, but it's difficult. It's a difficult projection to make, even when a guy has looked so good for the amount of time that, which is really less than 2 seasons. It's not a lot of time. The sample's not huge, so it's a difficult commitment.
But within those 2 seasons, the consistency in his games is interesting. He doesn't go into huge ups and downs. He hasn't had as many truly bad games as even Jake Allen.
Yeah.
So there's a baseline, there's a level there that's interesting, that's comforting, but there's such a stigma on the for many people over the fact that he's a waiver pickup. And
I don't think the Canadians look at that. I think the Canadians are looking at sample size, with him. And they're just the history of goaltending and how, yes, from the beginning of last season to now, it's been a steady progression. He's looked very consistent. He looks great, but I think you could go back in time and find many goalies over the course of that same sample who looked great, who turned out to be not great, and I think that's the concern.
Yeah. My bold prediction is that he's going to sign before the new year.
Really?
Yeah.
You're saying this on December 1st?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty bold, man.
I know. That's why it's a bold prediction.
Wow.
I'm giving it a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go against that. I think it's gonna drag on into the new year.
Okay, I'll buy you a beer. Well,
okay, you're already conceding defeat?
2 beers. No. But the wage, I'm waging
we'll
couple of beers.
We'll bet a beer.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, let's go have one.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Talk to you Monday.